Alright, welcome back everybody. This is GTM. We're going to go ahead and do a video tutorial lesson plan on procedural mapping in 3D Max. This is like the basics of materials, placing materials on your objects. And one other tool we're really going to focus on is using our UVW map tool. Alright, anyways, I'm going to go ahead and launch up 3D Max here. Okay, as you can see, we have some basic geometry here. I have a wall. If I go to my modify, you can see that's named wall. We got dresser, oil drum, and then I believe this plane down here, we're going to go ahead and name this ground. Oops, not grounds, ground. Alright, and one thing I want to mention is when you're starting to work with textures, you usually want to go ahead and save your 3D Max file, usually wherever it's at, on your hard drive or desktop. But you also, I'm clicking inside, you also want to have a texture map folder that has all your textures. So I'm going to go in here, and when you basically search for textures, you want to get some high res ones. And it's good to get a folder that you want to, save your textures, or if you're ever, searching online, always have like a master folder that you can pull big texture libraries out of. And like I said, there's tons of them out there, free, on Google. You can Google search. If you go to 3dtotal.com, there's actually some awesome total texture libraries that are you can actually purchase, and they're actually awesome textures. Or if you have like a high-res camera, or just any kind of decent camera, these iPhones nowadays, they take some really amazing pictures. You can go out and just take pictures of your own textures. Alright, well, as you can see here, I have a texture map folder with all my textures in, and like I said, you always want to carry that folder with whatever file you're working with. Alright, so let's go ahead and go back to 3D Max here. Alright, the first thing we're going to work on is actually the plane here. So I'm going to click on that, or the ground, hide unselected. Notice I'm in camera view, so I'm going to just hit P just to get out of camera view, and then I can move around here. Alright, the first thing I'm going to do is hit my material key, which is M, or like I said, you can go from here. Turn that on and off, and that takes you right to your material editor. Alright, I'm going to click on this second shader. Notice the first one I have gray shader. That's because I named it and I dragged that shader on all the objects. So I do not want to throw anything in here or on that shader. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to click on this shader. I'm going to leave it at blend for now. And I'm going to go ahead and find my first texture, which, that's supposed to be a ground, so I'm going to use like a concrete type of texture, at least for this scene. So right here in the none slot, I'm going to open that up. Notice our material map browser opens, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit bitmap. And that's the universal button. Doesn't mean you're going to throw bitmaps in there. It's just letting you know you can open up and slide any image in there, from JPEGs to bitmaps, PSD files. But to be honest, you're only going to, you're going to want to use JPEGs. So I'm going to go to my desktop where I have my textures, placed. So I'm going to go to my texture maps, and I'm going to go for the concrete diffuse, which is our main color map. So I'm going to open that up. I am going to, I'm going to go to the parent level. I'm not going to worry about the tiling here. This is later on. I'll explain all this. But from the parent level, that's where you drag the texture from. So I'm going to make sure I click till it's grayed out. And then from there, I'm going to double click this so you can see my concrete texture. And I'm going to go ahead and click and drag and put it on the plane. But notice we do not see it in the viewport. That's why we hit this guy, show standard maps and viewports. So if I hit that, now you can see our map on our object. I'm going to go ahead and close this. And there we go. We have our first diffuse texture laid down. And of course, if I render it out, hit my teapot there, now you can see our textures on there. Alright, but I'm going to explain another tool now. I'm going to go ahead and click on my object here, and once a texture is laid down, it doesn't mean that's the right way to do it. Yeah, of course you can just drop textures and things on objects, and usually like simple objects like planes and boxes, they'll work out pretty fine, but you always want to UVW map it. So I'm going to go to my modify list, click it down, all the way to the bottom around here, you can see not unwrap, but the UVW map. I'm going to open that up, and notice I'm going to get an orange bounding cage on my object here. And there, it's on my stack now. I got the gizmo. If I click that, I can actually rotate this onto the object. Now notice that little pointer right there, that little handle that sticks out. That's indicating what's the top of the texture. So if I were to open this Photoshop, you would see that's the top and this is the bottom. Now with that open and I'm on my gizmo, I can actually rotate that. So in case you need a certain position. But for now I'm just going to leave it right there. Now a couple rules on the UVW map. Rule number one is usually scale the UV map gizmo slightly bigger. But on an object like this, this is fine. We can actually fit it on there. And, you know, I'll explain that in a second here. But notice down here in the gizmo form, you have mapping. Or, you know, if I click on UVW mapping, there's the orange bounding box. When we're in gizmo, it shows it, you know, in yellow and then where the center point, or where it actually divides the green line. This is a planar, so technically we're going to actually just leave it at planar. But what if it was a cylinder object? You would use cylinder. Spherical, you would use spherical. Shrink wrap is just kind of like a crazy looking object with, you know, no start and end, you know. Box, basically boxes. Face is a regular face map. It puts it on one face. And then your XYZ, you know, which obviously we're not going to worry about that. So we're going to keep it on planar, and I'm going to fit it on there. So I'm going to, down here at the bottom you see fit, and that fits it right on there. Now notice we have tiling here. If I crank that up, it tiles the texture. Now that only works when you have seamless textures. In this case, this is not a seamless texture, so we want to kind of avoid that. So I'm going to keep that back to 1, and then 1. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and render this out. Whoops, let's keep this at 1. And like I said, this is our first diffuse texture. Now the next step is to actually create. I'm going to hit M key, and I'm going to go to my map section here. We got to create the specular level and the bump map. Those are 3 important maps. We already have one, the diffuse. Now we got to go specular, which is the highlights, and then the bump, which is the illusion of the bumpiness, the texture. And usually we do that in Photoshop. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Photoshop here in a second. Alright, back to creating our specular and our bump map. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Photoshop here. And I'm going to close this out. Now, the proper way to make your bump and speculars is based off your diffuse. So I'm going to open up the main diffuse. And as you can see, I already have them made, but I want to show you the process of it. So I'm going to open up the main color map, which is the diffuse. Alright, now, the first thing you got to do is create this into a black and white map. I'm going to unlock that, so I'm going to double click and unlock it. Now, a couple ways you can do it. You can go to Image, Mode, and just go to Grayscale. But I prefer going to Adjustments, Hues and Saturations, and then just saturating the image down to 0 or -100, which makes it a nice grayscale image. I'm going to go ahead and press OK, and then you File, Save As, and make it a JPEG. And in this case, you usually just click on whatever it is and then change the diffuse name to, in this case, I named it Bump and then saved it. Alright, and once you have the bump made, so I'm going to open up my bump. Here's the bump map. And now I make the specular based off the bump map. So let me just unlock this. So I'm going to go Image, Adjustments, and I'm going to work with my levels here. So the specular works off, you know, white's being hot and black's dulling it out, you know, your specular highlights. So in my levels, you got these black and white handles here and gray in between. So I'm actually crunching the blacks a bit, and notice the lighter spots are going to end up being my hot spots. And then I'm going to go ahead and crank up my white slightly. There you go, and that should be a good starting point for a specular map. So I'm going to press OK, then File, Save As, and then of course Save it as a JPEG, and I'll name it specular, and there it is. And just this one I'm just going to save over. Alright, now don't get me wrong, these images I used are really huge, and I never bothered to resize them. I guess it's okay for now since I'm just doing a demonstration, but usually you don't want to throw like, let me look at the image size on this. I mean, that's a huge map, and right now, I mean, for this demonstration you don't really need to go that big, let alone it's a 300 resolution. You might want to keep that at 72. That would really help out. So just keep that in mind. Alright, so let's go ahead and go back to 3D Max here, and I'm going to go ahead and put that specular level map in. So I'm going to click it. Actually, I'm going to double click this so you can see the changes happen. Right now we just had our fuse. Click on my specular bitmap, and now I'm going to load my specular map in there. I'm going to press OK. As you can see, the highlights kick in. Notice that these are big maps. Now watch when I turn that off. I went to my parent level. I'm going to turn off the check mark. It lets you know that you're turning off the map. There, specular off, specular on. But notice it's taking a while to load because those are huge maps. What you could normally do is once you got them in there, I can resize them and then save them over, and they should update. Alright, then I'm going to go ahead and load up my bump map. Bitmap, and then we got our bump map, and I'm going to open it up. And now notice the texture of the bump kicks in. There you go. So I'm going to go back to my parent level. My bump is at 30, my specular is at 100, and then my ambient, or what am I talking about? And my diffuse color is at 100. So I'm going to turn this off, bump, so it flattens it out, and then bump on, gives the illusion of the bumpiness, the texture. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and close that out. Now that should technically update. And then sometimes you might want to play it safe, so I'm going to make sure I'm on the parent level, and I'm just going to re-drag it on there. Alright, now once they're, your texture's on there, and if you're happy with it, I'm going to go ahead and render this out, just test it out. Now it looks okay, but we don't have a light in there, so we're not going to really see the bumps or the specular highlights, because they work based off having lights in your scene. So, but right now I'm happy with the texture, so I'm going to actually right click, collapse it too. And what that basically does, it's almost like in Photoshop when you rasterize an image or flatten an image. It's locking that, that texture in there. Don't get me wrong, we can always adjust it or drag a new texture on there. Wouldn't matter. Alright, so once I got that in there, I'm going to go ahead and minimize this for now. I'm going to X that out. And I'm going to go ahead and throw a light in my scene. So I'm going to go to my light tools here, change to standard, and I'm going to put a spotlight in here. So I'm going to go to my top. Let's Z up on everything. I'm going to zoom out. On my top, I'm going to go ahead and click a spotlight in there. In my front viewport, I'm going to raise that up a bit. And as you can see, the light's kicking on it. And now let's go ahead and modify that spotlight. So I'm going to click on that, modify, make sure you're on the light. Alright, so I'm going to turn on my shadows, intensity and color. I can probably crank that up just a bit. And I'm going to keep it at none for now, and then make sure my spotlight parameters, the hotspot and fall offs are spread out a bit. And then of course on my shadow parameters, I want maybe a 0.7. And then let's see, shadow map parameters, bias 0.1. You want your shadows to stick to the object. Not that we have anything right now to cast shadows. And I want to probably crank that up to 1024. My sample range is fine at 4. Alright, so I'm going to go to my perspective here. And now with our lights in the scene, I'm going to render this out. And as you can see, we have a nice little bump on. And of course, based off our highlights and specular levels, if I hit M, I can adjust these on the fly. Now watch what happens. I'm going to double click that. I want to change this to I'm going to crank this up to 100. Watch what happens. That is going to really crank up my bump. Not that you would ever want to bump that high. So, you know, I was just letting you know you can adjust these on the fly. So I'm going to keep that maybe at a 30. And of course my specular, I can adjust that a bit. Maybe I feel like it's too hot. I can bring this down, say maybe to 75. Alright, there, looks pretty good. By the way, I'm going to render this out, and after I do, I'm going to stop the record session, and I'm going to resize these maps, and then we'll continue, just so it speeds up things. That was my fault for not, you know, resizing my maps. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and render this out. And, you know, looks like we got a pretty good, you know, texture laid down. Alright, and of course that's at an angle, so it's going to look a little weird like that, but that's okay. Alright, I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to, you know, then we're going to work with another object. Okay, let's go ahead and continue to our next object. So I'm going to go ahead and right click in here, you know, out in the gray. I'm going to unhide all, and I'm going to go ahead and work with this wall right here. So I'm click that, right click, hide unselected. I'm going to hit my Z key just to zoom up on this. Now remember, we have a light in the scene, so if I actually hit my Control L, that takes me back to default lighting. So that way, it's usually good to go back and forth from default lighting and lighting. That way you can see your textures on your geometry. So right now I turned off my lights, even though they're in the scene. Alright, so we're going to work with this whole wall right here. Now this is what's the beauty about procedurals and just your standard UV mapping. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pick a new shader here, and we're going to go ahead and call this brick wall. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and get the brick texture, the diffuse one, the color map. So right in the diffuse slot, I'm going to open that up, bitmap, and then there goes my wall diffuse. As you can see, I already made the bump map and the specular the same way I did, you know, the concrete grounds, you know, maps and bumps, or specs and bumps. Alright, so let's go ahead and open that up. I'm going to double click this so you can see. And like I said, it's a brick wall, so if I wanted to click that and show it in box form, I can at least see how the texture is laid on it. It looks pretty good. But for now, you know, let's go ahead and go back to sphere. Alright, parent level. That's the way we drag it on there, so we've got to make sure that's grayed out. And you can go ahead and click that now, just so when we drag it on it shows up. And this is your show maps and viewport. So from here now, I'm going to just go ahead and click and drag it on there. Alright, now I threw it on the whole object because I had it selected. Now, you know, if I wanted to, I can actually go on my sub-object level. I just Control-Z, by the way. I can actually go to my sub-object level of this geometry, and maybe I just wanted it on that wall or this section of the wall, and I can click and drag it, and the texture will be on there. But of course we need to UV map it now to get it right. But you know, let's go ahead, I'm just going to throw the whole thing on there, and we can basically start fixing these up. Now one thing I can do is you know, we'll start off on certain sections. So what I could do is, in my sub-object level, I'm going to go ahead and grab just these polys. I'm going to throw a UV map just on this section. So I'm going to go to my modify list, UV map, and you can see where the orange bounding box is, but it's not wrapped around it right. So technically this is a box, or rectangle if you want to call it. So I'm going to go to box there, just kind of fit it on there, but as you can see we still got stretching, and that's one of the rules of texturing. You do not want stretching. Any employer that's looking at your demo rails, if they see any kind of stretching, they're going to know that you're lazy and basically you don't pay attention to detail. Alright, so with the UV map on there, let's drop it to the gizmo here. I'm going to take my scale tool, and you know, we can play it safe and go on its local axis, and that means the rule is, let's go ahead and always scale, you know, the gizmo bigger than the geometry itself. And as you can see, look at the sides. The pinching is now getting straightened out a little bit. That's usually what you want to do. And if you want, you can actually stretch it this way. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now from here, you know, even the top, we can bring it out. That's why you make the boxes a little bit bigger. Alright, but even our bricks are kind of going the wrong way. We can fix those. And like I said, from here now, I can tile it a little bit. Not too much though. Obviously, look, this is not a, you know, we already can see the tiling happen. That's not good. We're just going to go ahead and, you know, we'll make this a little bit bigger just for now. Like I said, we don't have a seamless texture we're working with, so we got to keep this as basic as possible. Alright, but now I got it on there. I'm going to go ahead and click, right click, collapse to, and I'm going to lock that texture in there. But notice right there, hold on, let me hit my Control L. Okay, just want to turn off my lights. We can fix that one little section. That's what's so awesome about procedural texturing. So I can grab just that poly and align it properly, so I can throw a UV map just on those, just that selected poly, UVW map, and I'm going to kind of zoom out. I'm going to go to my gizmo here. I'm going to scale that out, and then I'm going to go to my rotate, and I'm going to rotate the map this way 90 degrees, and I can probably scale that out just a bit. And now I can possibly tile this, not that way, but V-tile. Maybe we want it to 1, 2, let's go that way. That's how we want it to look, I guess. Right. Right about there. It's neat how we can adjust it on the fly. Alright, so that looks pretty good. I think the top is okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and just click on it on top of the stack, right click, collapse to, and hit yes, and now that locks it in place. Now we can fix the other parts. Alright, so I can actually go back to the poly and polygon mode. I'm going to select this side now, and we'll worry about this side later right here. Actually, we can probably grab those two, and I'm hitting control. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and go UV map, because we got to remap that. It's a box, so I'm going to hit box, and then go to my gizmo, and we're going to start scaling it out. Notice we can see the texture through the red section, and that is because we're in polygon form. Now, believe me, if we were in mesh, chances are we probably wouldn't see the texture through there. I could be wrong. They might have changed by now in later versions of Max. But let's go ahead and scale this out just a bit. Alright, that looks pretty good. And, you know, I may raise that up just a bit. Okay, that looks pretty good just for now. Like I said, we're not doing anything too perfect. I just want to let you know how you can adjust with your UV mapping. And you know, one thing, we probably want to scale these to match these bricks. So actually, let me bring back that height back down to match it. We can probably go a little bit more, something like that. Now the neat thing is, with the gizmo selected, we can actually adjust these to match certain, you know, maybe brick for brick. In this case, you know, sometimes it's tough, but that's why we get into mix mapping, and that's another process you will eventually learn. All right, but that looks pretty decent for now. We'll just, you know, we'll keep that, and I'm gonna right click, or I'm gonna go on top of here on the stack, right click. Is that right? Yeah, and then collapse to lock it in. Now if I want to really get technical, I could probably remap that little top portion just by clicking on that face. Go to my modifier list, UV map, and let's go to our gizmo. It's like a routine or repetitive process. I'm scale that out, but this time I'm going to rotate it because I want the bricks going this way. And we can probably scale that out this way. And let's go ahead and UV tile it. I think I wanted them that way. Oh, maybe I didn't. That's why we can always go back. I'm going to go 90. Let's fit it that way, and then let's rescale it out. Alright, that looks pretty, you know, that's okay for now. And you know what, let's go ahead and click that collapse too. You know what, look, we got some scaling going on, so I may actually, you know, take this one, this, and this, and just fix those front and backs. I can always throw another UV map on there. Let's go back to planar, but let's fit it on the X axis. No, it'll probably be the Y. Fit it there. So we're, you know, just mapping the front and back. And I'm going to take my gizmo, and we probably, let's see, we have no tiled textures, but I didn't want these stretching. Guess we're going to have to deal with this. That's, yeah, that looks fine. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and close that out. Lock it in. Alright, of course I probably wanted, you know, these bricks to kind of be, you know, match these, but we're not going to get too picky right now. Alright, so we have our bricks down. Let's go ahead and throw our bumps and speculars on it. So I'm going to go right here to my map slot. I'm on that brick wall shader. And I'm going to go ahead and go to my specular bitmaps, and we're going to load our specular map, which is red brick wall spec. Now you're going to see this shine up a bit. I'm going to go back to my parent level and turn on my bump. And let's go ahead and add that bump map as well. So it's right here. Alright, now you can see this is going to kind of dent up a bit. There we go, looking good. Alright, so I'm going to go back to my parent level, which is fine, and of course we can adjust these on the fly. I'm going to close that out, unhide everything, and let's just pick our brick wall and our ground, and I'm going to hide the rest. And let's go ahead and render that out and see what we got so far. Alright, looks like our, you know, brick wall's looking pretty good. Looks like it's kind of floating in the air, so I might actually click on this and just slightly bring it down. There, and give it one more render. And so far, you know, we got some decent, you know, just regular procedural texture going on. Not sure why that looks like it's floating. Maybe it's because the shadows from that angle. That's alright though. We'll probably have to zoom up. Alright, but I'm going to close that out, and then we're going to end up starting on texturing the barrel next.